rest of the world, that will be also a kind of welcome thing for us. First of all, the thing is that when we are talking about agile testing, then the first thing is that we are going to talk about the foundation and the building blocks of the agile testing, which are very, very important, because before we even start talking about any topic, we start delving into details. So we start thinking like how to do the automation testing, for example. But what I find in my experience is that the problems are not the technical aspects which happen in the project, but from how the team is working together from the agile point of view. So I'll be putting a lot of stress on those aspects as in this session, and in the ongoing sessions we'll be focusing on the technical part. So for example, how the test driven development can be done, how the acceptance test driven development can be done. So those sessions will be focused on more details. As far as the questions are concerned, what you can do is you can put your questions in the chat window. And what I will do is after the session is over, I'll be taking those questions and we'll answer one by one. So let's begin. First of all, when the question arises, so I'm right now a traditional tester, and I am entering into agile environment. What does it mean to me? Does it make any difference? Is the difference in terms of only agile mindset, or the way I am going to work in the projects is going to be changed? What I've seen in my experience is that it's a change on both sides. There's a huge mindset shift happens when you work in the agile environment, and I'll be focusing on those aspects. And at the same time, the way you work is also going to be changed. I'm talking about the toolings, the way you have been working from testing point of view earlier, so that all that is going to be changed. And there are reasons behind that, why there is a focus on automation, or the way things change from a technical point of view happens. There are reasons behind them, and I'll be talking about them also. So let's talk about, first of all, where we come from. We come from the traditional environment, and if you see this picture, you see a lot of silos. There's a customer who hands over a kind of business case to the business analyst who do the requirement analysis, and then that requirement document is handed over to the development team, again over the fence, and then development is done, finished, and then it is handed over to the testing team, and similarly to the deployment. So what you can see that our efficient. So here, from the development point of view, I want to finish whatever I need to do from the coding perspective, and similarly, tester would like to find out as many bugs as is possible, and that's how he will be called as a great tester. So the goal looks like to be our individual professions, but at the end of it, what we are trying to do is creating a product or software or application which can be used by the end customer, and that is delivered in time. When I'm saying deliver in time, it doesn't mean that you are supposed to take 6 months to deliver a feature, then you're doing it. But I'm saying that as a customer, I need this software right now. I need a feature right now, not after 6 months. So because if I get that piece of software after 6 months, then the whole scenario, which is changing rapidly day by day, is going to change, and my application may not be applicable at that point of time. So I need that piece of software right now. So, and in this environment where you see that uh, everything is handed over in over the fence. So what you see that before you start using anything, it may have taken, for example, 6 months or something like that, and you have not provided any feedback on anything. So that is a perspective from the development team side. But at the same time, customers are also either defensive or are very offensive, and there is a reason behind that. What happens is, as soon as they give the business requirement, any change becomes a change request. When you start thinking about product very immediately, everything is in your head on the paper, or sometimes you may not be able to understand what is really required, because you get to know about things when you find something in hand, and then you say, okay, fine. Instead of that, I may be looking some that. So you make decisions when you have something in your hand. So it is not for anybody to really put every requirement in his head on the paper, and that's where the change requests come into picture. And change request means more cost. So what a customer does is, like, instead of think about what he really needs, he puts everything in his head on paper, and that's where you see the proliferation of the requirements. Some of the requirements are in the requirement document, but they may not be needed. So basically, is the combination of everything that that you may not be getting what you want, but at the same time you may be putting a lot of pressure as a customer on the team to finish everything, and that also creates quality problems. So what changes? If you see from the agile point of view, then the focus is completely changed. The change is that instead of thinking as a developer, as a tester, I am thinking as a team member. I'm thinking that the mind and the goal of the team is to make sure that we deliver the quality product. Nobody cares if at the end of 2 weeks you are able to churn out some piece of code which works but is not tested. Similarly, your DB design is done. At the same time, you can't show anything to the end user at the end of two weeks. So the focus here is that at the end of one iteration, you are able to show something to the customer which can be used in the production, and that's where the mind shift change it happens in the agile team. Instead of thinking as an individual what you want to do, the focus of the team is more towards what you need to deliver. And how this support and collaboration really happens in the agile team will be discussed in the next slides. Let's see another focus on agile versus traditional process. So if you see the current slide, you will see that in the slide you are doing analysis, design, coding, and testing. Analysis, so time is 20% completed, and that's where you are still doing the analysis. So though 20% of the time is done or completed, but nothing is in your hand. Here in the agile process, what happens is that you do the requirement analysis, design, coding, testing as part of one iteration itself. So you want to fit you instead of creating the big chunk of the functionality, you are dividing them into slices of the features. And instead of focusing on doing the whole thing in one go, you provide the slice of the functionality to the customer. So if you see here, when you say 20% done, then it means that whatever 20% you are delivering is usable by the end user. and that's where the difference comes. So so the question comes like, how is it possible? It's earlier we used to take months or years to complete something, and now you are talking about 2 weeks delivering something to the end user. How is it possible? So that's where we are talking about two things. One is agile culture, and another is focus on the quality. So when you talk about the agile culture, what we are trying to say here is that we are collaborating in almost anything. So collaboration means that instead of writing big chunks of document and passing over to developer, what we are trying to do is we are trying to create document which is really required, and instead of passing over the document to the developer, we focus on the communication. So you have a frame of required, and you capture that in a small document, but that's where the communication really starts. And that's where, so in case there are questions, then there is a lot of communication between the product owner and the development team. And uh, if you are if you're trying to test something, then again you are not dependent on create that you're not dependent that if before you start testing anything, every documentation has to be done. This is one part of the this one part of the pictures. Another part of the picture is that team is helping each other to do or finish the iteration goal. So for instance, my development work is done, but that doesn't mean that, and basically then the bottleneck seems to be testing team, but that doesn't work in the agile team. So how it works is like, in case there is some bottleneck at some place, then other team members try to help those members to finish the issue, and that's a change. So other picture which I'm trying to show here is the cross-functional team. Cross-functional team is like, in the traditional projects I have worked earlier, what used to happen was one particular developer may be focused on certain functionality and he only knows about that. What happens in case he's gone? When he's gone, so those particular people used to become the bottlenecks. So what happen? So right now, what happens in the agile team is that instead of being a specialist, you are considered as a generalist, and what it means that you should be, at the end of it, you should be able to work on any piece of code at any point of time. You will ask how it is possible. I mean, certain people will be having a specialization on certain things. So how is it possible that everybody can work on everything? So that's where the pair programming comes into picture. So instead of working as an individual and making yourself as a bottlenecks, you try to work as a pair. So pair programming is not just that you are designing together, you're coding together, and you're having a lot of discussion. It also means that you are doing the knowledge transfer implicitly, and that's where the cross-functional part comes into picture, or cross-skilling comes into picture. Another part is focus on the quality. Uh, it's not at all possible to deliver a production-ready code if you're not having a good amount of focus on the quality. It's certainly possible in 2 weeks. Only thing you can do is that you can try to automate things so that you can avoid the human error. and that's where the focus is, as if you're talking about when we are talking about the agile teams. So let's see how the role of the tester changes in the agile project. So here is a picture of the typical card wall in an agile project. When I'm saying when I'm talking about the card wall, it also means as a scrum board, or yeah, we also call them as the card wall. The big cards are the user stories, and the smaller the stickies are the task. What you see on the right hand side of the board is that you have to do, in progress, and done. You don't see that there is a kind of distinction between development, testing, or those kind of things. You don't see those kind of columns over there. So the implicit focus here is to complete the user story, whatever it is required to finish that user story is considered as a task. So just want to ensure that how the mind shift uh, changes happen in the Agile project. So as I talked initially about what was the picture of a tester in the project, that you able to get as bugs as possible, and that was a mind. But now the idea is that if you think about getting the bugs and then fixing them afterwards, that means a lot of waste. It takes a lot of time. What if before those bugs really happen, you try from your point of view? And because the tester has different eyes and different focus, he can find out quickly. Okay, these things are fine, but I can find some problems over there or there. So instead of checking in the code into the source repository, creating a build, deploying it, and then finding out the bugs, what if like you are able to find those bugs on the developer machine? You can definitely say that developer's machine is not really perfect. I definitely agree, but at the same time you are able to find a lot of issues then and there, because the way the focus is from a tester point of view, and that brings a huge saving. I mean, like pushing the code into the source repository and everything takes a lot of time, and then finding out the bugs and then fixing them again, it's a big cycle. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to reduce the whole cycle, and that's a big saving. Before we move to the incremental functional testing, another part is where the tester can help the developers is, for example, a developer is writing a unit test for a certain class or certain functionality. He can think the test cases from his point of view, but what if a tester joins and he provides the different test cases? What if this? What if that? What is this? So basically, those test conditions are created by a pairing session between developer and tester, and you get a good quality of the test cases instead of writing on your own. Another thing is incremental functional testing. So the idea is Uh, for instance, like if you are working on a user story from a development point of view, and you find that you know that it's going to take at least 5 days before you can hand it over to the tester, and tester may take some more time to finish the testing part. In many situations it happens that a tester find a very little time to finish the testing in the iteration of the sprint. So in those cases, it's very difficult to finish the iteration. So one of the idea which we try to implement in our teams was to think to divide the user story from the functional point of view. As a developer, we definitely try to uh, identify a task from how it needs to be done, how the user story needs to be done. But in these cases, what we're trying to do is we are trying to find out the function, how we can divide the user story into functional chunks. So as soon as one functional chunk is done, it is handed over to the tester and he can test it. I definitely understand that it is not it is not definitely so much effective as the whole functionality is given and things like that. But at the same time, uh, it saves a lot of time. Like you find the issues in your functionality very early, and instead of giving those whole chunks of the issues at the end at the end of the testing cycle, you keep on giving them to the developer, and you can reduce that testing cycle. Another part is how a tester can help in the product owner in preparing the product backlog. This is a very, very important part because what I've seen is the certain failures of the agile projects is mainly attributed because of lack of a good user story or product backlog. What happens is that you find the changes in the user story in between the sprint. Similarly, you find out, okay, you started working on the sprint on the user story, but you find out this user story has a dependency on certain other user story or on the third party, which you cannot finish as part of the sprint, and then you can't do anything. Also, many times it happens that product owner comes ill prepared as part of the sprint planning. And what happens is one sprint planning becomes a discussion of 4 and 6 hours or never ending discussion because there are a lot of questions which have never been answered. So that you find there is a lot of waste happening, and at the end of it is not delivering anything. That's where the definition of ready comes into picture. So idea is that any user story can go into the iteration only when it is ready. When I say ready, it means that from the development point of view, for a tester or a developer, I don't have any question unanswered on the user story. Not only me as a development team that member, but also the business is on the same page when we are trying to identify what needs to be done as part of the user story. So there is no pending questions on that user story. And that can only happen when there is a good amount of work done behind the scene before the iteration. It doesn't really happen that you find out the user story at the in the sprint planning itself, and then you find out, oh, there are a lot of questions on this one, this user story also, this user story also. So there has to be a good amount of work done before you come to the sprint planning. And that's where the tester can help the product owner. So asking a lot of questions, preparing the product backlog or the user story, defining the acceptance criteria of each user story, and after all that is done, having a discussion together as a team to thrash out the user story and finding out if there are any remaining issues or not. So that can be done as part of backlog grooming, and tester can help a lot in that exercise. I'm talking about those teams where testers only are available as part of the team and business analysts are not available. By default, this work is done by the business analyst. But in case you just have the testers available, they also work as a pseudo product owner. So they work as a product owner for the team. So if you see the card wall again, which I displayed or showed in the previous slide, on the left hand side you find a, uh, a area where you are trying to prepare what is going to be in the next iteration, next to next iteration, next to next iteration. So 3 iterations backlog is already there, and what you're trying to do is like this is a kind of horizon. What kind of user story will be there in those iteration, but user story can enter in the ready stories only when those questions are really answered. You don't have anything remaining questions on those user story. Another part where the tester can help a lot uh, and is considered as a gateway to the definition of done. So when I go back to this slide over here, what you're trying to say is that from the product owner point of view, I need ready user story, but at the same time, product owner wants done user story. So that's where it comes to the picture. When I say done, there can be a definition of done. That means you have done your coding, test cases are written. When you're talking about unit test cases, then the test coverage is around 75%. You have written the functional test cases. Those test cases are passing, and tester is satisfied with the user story. And for example, business or the customer or the product owner has approved the user story. So depending on the teams, that definition of done really changes. But what I'm trying to say over here is that testers are the gateway to the definition of done. Nobody cares if your development is done, but only the tester can say that from the testing point of view, I am satisfied, and now it is ready for example, for the business review or maybe to deploy into the production. So next comes the quality focus in Agile. Fine, we want to churn out the functionality in 2 weeks, but how it cannot be possible without the quality focus. And what is the quality focus? First is continuous integration and the quality build. So the idea of the, I can tell you one instance. I was working in a traditional project. It was of around 120 people or more than that in that project. It was a big team. What used to happen was when we used to give the functionality to test to the testers, it used to take at least 2 days to make the build, which testers can test. And that was because some part which is some part of the code which is pushed in the source repository is not compiling, for example, or if it is compiling, then the functionality is not working. So there used to be a lot of issues, and it was really kind of hell when we are trying to integrate different part of the functionality. So the idea of the continuous integration is a kind of doing the build at every instant. When I say build the code at every instant, that means is, as soon as developer pushes the code into the source repository, for example in SVN or Git, uh, there is a build server that picks up the source code and will create the build. So you can create the automated build for your project using, depending on the technology you're using, for example Maven or Ant or whatever. So based on that, you can create the automated build. This build runs on the build server, and in case as part of the build, it will be compiling the source code and will be running the test cases also, automated test cases. Automated test cases can be unit test cases or integration test cases and functional test cases. If anything fails, it will send the response in form of email, for example, or in certain Agile teams, it is a kind of build light. Build light is some, like if build is broken, then the build light becomes red, otherwise it's green. So the idea is that as soon as you push the source code into the repository, the build server runs the build. In case it fails, then it sends a notification to the developers, and they need to fix it immediately. So that is a one focus where you bring the quality in picture. Second thing is, on top of the build itself, you can put more criterias, and that means build will pass only if the test coverage is more than 75%. So you can put a threshold on top of whatever you're doing, and in case it is below 75%, for example, it will again break the build. And similarly, you can put a lot of automation on top of the existing build instead of doing it manually, and that response can be sent to the team. So for example, I can say, like, what is the test coverage. I can also identify what are the kind of issues are there from a design point of view in the code. So all that can be visible in as part of dashboard. Another thing is focus on automation testing. And the immediate question comes, why automation testing, first of all? And and there is a reason behind it. What if, like, I mean, there are certain cases when you are creating the use and through softwares. In those cases, you test this once and that is done. I mean, that's in those cases you don't need to do any kind of automation testing. But what if you are trying to create the functionality in the first iteration, then test it. In the next iteration also you test it, but at the same time you do the regression testing of the functionality you create in the first iteration. So this whole thing of the regression test cases will keep on compiling iteration by iteration. Initially, for example, you may be taking 1 day for the testing, regression testing. Now that keep on building, and that becomes itself a bottleneck. Development is done. Development is just one line of code, but the whole testing takes 2 weeks, and that is one of the issues or what I see in the enterprises. So instead of doing that as a manual testing, those test cases can be created as automated tests, which run as part of the continuous integration build. So in case you changed some code and that broke any regression test, that error will be sent to the developers and they have to fix it again. So that's where the importance of the automation testing comes into picture. Another aspect is, I mean, in case you want to deliver something production ready at the end of the iteration, you need to make sure that that can be done quickly, and that's where again the automation testing comes into picture. So another aspect, so let's move on to the unit and integration testing, how it is done. I'll not be putting a lot of focus on that, but I'll be giving some brief ideas on that. First is unit testing. So unit testing is more from the developer's point of view. What they do is they use test-driven development. The idea of the test-driven development is that instead of start writing the functionality and then writing the test cases, you write the test cases first, and then based on those test cases you create the functionality. So instead of because like the idea is that in case you develop the functionality, then you are already biased towards functionality, and you may not be able to think about the test cases at that point of time. And test cases creation becomes a kind of ritual which you need to do. But in this case, you need to focus on what you're trying to do, what you want to have from this class, for example. And you write the test cases first. You write the failing test cases, and then when you write the code on top of that, then those test cases pass, and that's how you work. So the idea of the TDD based or the unit test cases based testing is that what if you don't have any test cases at all in your functionality? In that cases, it will be something like the first figure, where you find the error, but you have absolutely no clue where the problem is. So that particular bug may take half an hour, but it may take also 2 days. Who knows? And you may have seen it a lot of time. In the second case, you see that there is a lot of test cases around the functionality. So in case it fails, you can figure out quickly where the problem is, because that particular test case will break, and you will find out, okay, this test case is breaking, now I need to fix it. Fine. Next part is automation functional testing. So what I've discussed so far is more about the unit test cases, and that's where, for example, in Java we use JUnit. But if you want to automate the functional test casing, and that's where the testers part come into picture, you try to use different frameworks for the automation functional testing. So there are different options like Selenium, QTP, Sahi, FitnessA. The first three, which are mentioned here, are based on the web browser based testing. So testing can only be done when the development is done. Next part is FitnessA. FitnessA is something like you write the test cases in a language which everybody can understand, and that is a kind of executable spec. You give it to the developers. They create the code, and at the end of it satisfy those test cases. So basically, in this case, the test cases can be written even before the development is done. But what I've seen is that FitnessA is not very user friendly. It is supposed to be very user friendly, but and when I say user friendly, that means you should be able to understand. Any business user should be understand those test cases, but that is not the case in FitnessA. The next is acceptance test driven development. Is based on the similar kind of idea of the FitnessA, where the test cases are written first and the development is done later. And there are different names. Some people say it as an acceptance test driven development. Some people say it as a behavior driven development. specification by example. So there are different names, but the idea is same. So let's see the one test case scenario of a behavior-driven development test case. I mean, you can call it BDD, but you can also call it as a ATDD. So what you see here, there is a scenario a valid person has entered, has been entered. So I'm talking about a web form where you need to enter certain fields, and based on that, a valid person has to enter. So there are preconditions. One is filling out the person form with the first name and last name, and then submit the link has been clicked. So based on this idea, then the report should have the list of the races for that person. So what you see over here, first of all, is that there is a kind of skeleton which is the BDD. The implementation is done in the gray space over there from using Selenium, but this whole thing as a text can be given to the developer or the tester without uh, without thinking anything. And all the scenarios or the when condition or then conditions are in pure English, so anybody can read it, and anybody can anybody should be able to figure it out what it really means. And that's a great idea of this test case. Instead of thinking from the technical point of view or Java point of view how this needs to be done. So the BDD or ATDD test cases create a kind of common language between developers and testers and the business, so they can use these test cases wherever they need. If you talk about the acceptance test driven development in distributed agile, it is very much useful. So as I mentioned earlier, that many times the problem is not that the technical team has any issues, or that they don't have the competency to deliver the software, but the issue comes because of the non-availability of the product owner. For example, the user stories are not explained at the right time, so there is a lot of issues because of that. So what if uh, uh, so there is a first scenario, which is a kind of normal scenario. There is a product owner and a customer, scrum master, and a team. The second scenario is where I'm talking about, and though in this particular picture I'm saying that product owner with hello. Uh, so in the second picture, what you see is that product owner with business analyst. In this case, it can be the tester also. So what happens is that product owner is supported by a business analyst or a tester. Tester sits at the on-site, and he creates those ATDD test cases in the form of given, when, and then. These test cases are given as an acceptance criteria to the development team, and they need to satisfy all those test cases. So you can see a clear defined language which can be used in a distributed team, so that the whole acceptance criteria can be created by a tester or business analyst and can be given to the offshore team, and they can make sure that those are satisfied. So there is no question of or ambiguity in terms of the acceptance criteria anymore. They are talked in the language business understand, but at the same time, they are understood by the development team. There are other ideas of the testing automation like QTP and Tosca. Tosca or these kind of tools are useful when you are working in an enterprise where the testers have been manual tested for years and years. Some testers are working for 20 years, 25 years. So they may not want to go, or they are not able to go towards automation because of their competency or the stage where they are. So in those cases, certain enterprises are going towards scriptless testing automation tools, in which the Tosca is quite heavily used these days, but it is very expensive, and at the same time, you will not be able to achieve acceptance as driven development using this, because it is a scriptless by definition. So last area is potential issues for the testers in agile teams. So one is like estimation not done as a team. So many teams I have seen is that um, they definitely consider the effort or the sizing of the developers, but they don't consider the testers effort, and in those cases it becomes a really big issues to finish the user stories in time in iterations, and there is a lot of pressure on the tester comes. Another issue is that there is not enough time for the testing. So you give the user story at the end of the iteration when only 1 or 2 days are left, and you leave it to the tester. So again, that is a kind of dysfunctional team, and where what I generally do in these kind of teams is to have a kind of norm between the tester and developer to define how much time testers require before they can do testing. So developers have to give the test the code to them at that particular time, or other uh, area is to have the incremental functional testing, as I mentioned before. Though I have focused a lot in the silos between the in the traditional teams and one team definition of the in the agile, but many times I have seen that there are multiple silos in the agile teams also. So one idea is like, for example, developer says that, oh, my work is done, fine, I'm good, and only thing is which is remaining the testing. So tester is worried. I mean, he's not able to finish the work, so nobody is really helping out the tester at that point of time. So developer is picking up the next user stories from the iteration or the next iteration, instead of focusing to finish the user story. So he can help the tester out. For example, in terms of creating some script which can faster the way the tester is doing the testing, or many ways in helping out the tester. So in this case, what you see is that uh, developers are just taking care of what they need to do instead of working as a team. I think that's it from my side. You can you can put your questions, and I can answer one by one. If somebody wants, he can open his mic also. Um,
Hey, Shrikant, there was one question by one of the persons. He was interested. Let me see. It was from Dheeraj. Can you tell us the tools for the build automation? Can you just I think some of the tools that are typically used for build automations are like Hudson, Jenkins, Bamboo, Cruise Control. Are some of the tools that are quite often used. Shrikant, do you have you used some other tools too for build automation?
so first of all, I mean, there are two parts of the build automation. First is the automated build itself, and
Yeah.
that is very important. So you may be using Maven or Ant for that particular purpose. When you're talking about the build automation tools, then they are really the continuous integration tools. Build automation is just one part of the continuous integration. So in those cases, from the Java point of view, people have been using Jenkins, which is free, From the .NET point of view, I've seen people using a lot Team City, uh, and yeah, I mean, as far as the web automation is concerned, people have been using heavily Selenium, which is very scalable. At the same time, people have been using Sahi also.
Okay. Um, so there's another question by Charu. Shrikant, you're able to see the question in your window? Like, what are the
Uh,
documents that are created in Agile Teams?
just a moment. Yeah, I can see. Yeah, so as far as documentation is concerned, what I've seen is one is the card, which I explained earlier, user story card. I can show it also. So if you see this card wall, you can see a story card in which you mention what the user story is all about. So in order to achieve something as a user, I want to do this. So this is a user story card. This is the first level of documentation. Based on this user story card, business analyst or product owner create a user story document, which is kind of one page or two page or something like that, which explains what the user story is all about, what needs to be done, any kind of screenshot and things like that. And then basically in that document they also put acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria again in the language which is mentioned, uh, which I just mentioned as part of the acceptance test driven development language. So they put the acceptance criteria in that language. So that is a kind of documentation which is done in order to help the team to finish the user story. Another kind of documentation can be the training documentation, and that documentation can be created with different ideas. So instead of creating a huge document, you can create a screencast also, which can be very helpful for the user who are using the software or any kind of video cast. So I mean, instead of thinking just the documentation, you have to think what you really need, why the documentation is really required, and is there any better way to do it, and then basically you do it.
Yeah, I think that's
uh,
very true, Shrikant, because even I feel it's very rightly said. Documentation can be in different formats. Let's not get confused. Documentation means it should be in the Word format. It could be a video. It could be just a screen capture. It could be just a whiteboard which you have taken it as on a camera as a pic and sharing it. So in Agile Teams uses different kinds. It's just matter of you need to identify the purpose first. Like why do I really need this documentation? Identify the purpose, and you could use some other creative ways of achieving it with less time, less effort. So if you think in a particular project, for example, I was involved recently was in one of the healthcare domains where they need to do a lot of software quality audits, FDA, and a lot of other regulatory and compliance. So then they added documentation as part of their product backlog because there is some business value to your end customers or your end users. So treat it every piece as there is some business value to someone. Add it as part of your product backlog. Let it get prioritized, and let's see there is a value of doing this documentation. I think that's the should be our approach, but rather than blindly following any level of documentation.
yeah, I think that the most important question to ask always is why do you need this document? Is there a better way to do it? Is there a way to do it in person? Can you do have a communication or conversation with that person instead of writing the document? And
True.
if the that kind of documentation is really required, then what can be the best way to do it? The documentation is just one medium, and there can be different medium which are coming these days.
Yeah.
So that's like another question is around how are the non-functional taken care as part of the agile testing. uh, Again, I think non-functional is a bigger area. Basically, what I see over here is that, uh, and most of the time, what people talk about is the performance testing. But what I see over here is that performance testing is not only the part of the testers, but basically, more importantly, part of the developers also. Because in to identify, defining the performance test cases, and executing them, finding out the issues, solving them, it requires a lot of coordination and collaboration between testers and developers. Another thing is that many times I've seen that that people in the agile teams, non-functions are sometimes ignored. What people think is that at the end of it, they have to churn out the functionality. They are developers, they are testers, and basically they churn out the functionality as soon as possible. But non-functions are ignored, and they uh, those non-functions on at the end of it, they create the whole havoc. So what I recommend generally is to have a person from the architect uh, mindset in the team. Again, when I talk about the architect, he is not the person who is living in the ivory tower and just saying, okay, this thing needs to be done, that thing needs to be done, and he doesn't do anything. My definition of the architect is that he is part of the team, he is doing the development also, but for example 30 or 40% of time he's focused on the architectural aspect. So you need to have a focused person, or dedicated person to make sure that all the non-functionals are satisfied. And in that respect, having a person with that background really helps. Uh, does this answer the question, functional point of non-functional point of view, Ajay? Okay, the next question is, just a moment, let me take it out. Yeah, so in our scenarios, we are doing 1 month sprint where 3 weeks the team completes the user story, and fourth week the UAT team does the UAT. But the UAT is really getting pushed to complete the testing within the sprint. How should we organize? So again, what I generally see uh, is that there are different kind of scenarios. One scenario is that you have a complete understanding of the UAT environment. I mean, UAT environment or the system environment, SID environment can be created whenever you want, and that is these days possible if you are using virtual machines. So virtual machines can be created within a spin of time. For example, within 1 or 2 minutes, you can create a new machine. And in that, when I say machine, it not only creates the whole environment, but also not only creates the machine, but also create the whole environment to test your software. So in those cases, like uh, instead of doing it at the end, you can do it as soon as your user story is done. So and basically have the automation test cases on top of that. And those So what changes from the environment perspective uh, is just the data or the environment itself, but test cases should not change. So you can run those test cases in the SIT environment and the UAT environment both, and if they are done using automated build, so then you don't have to waste a lot of time doing that. Other area is I'm talking about the enterprise which have very hard and tough rules regarding the UAT environment, and also UAT environment cannot be created uh, uh, in a 1 or 2 minutes, and it takes a lot of time. So in those cases, people focus on within the sprint on the SIT environment. They test the software on the SIT environment, and uh, as part of the release, they define the time for the UAT testing, and that's where they do a UAT testing. So it can be done in both ways. You can do it in the same sprint also, but in that case you need to have good amount of automation in place so that you don't waste a lot of time in creating the environment and the test data. And the second case is like you give is the defined sprint time for the UAT testing.
Yeah, right, Shrikant. I think one of the key things here is when you're achieving any level of testing within a sprint is ability to split the stories small enough so that you could, as the team, can able to start finishing the stories every couple of days. Few stories are getting completed and it's pushed to the testing. I think that's the only way you could really integrate testing very well within a sprint, so that as you head towards the end of sprint, almost you have done everything. Development, the testing is done, even some of the defects that are found have been fixed. So one of the key things that comes is, other than the what Shrikant mentioned about the environment, either some teams may go for a stabilization sprint too, wherein they get the UAT. But other part is really is the key is one, the ability to split the stories into small, so that you don't give testers at the last minute, at the later part of the sprint, but you start giving something to them quite early.
Okay, the next question is about, do we have any equivalent of functional and technical specs? Um I think, as I mentioned, that you can create the user story. I mean, again, you need to identify why you need it, and many times I have seen that people create a functional specs, but nobody really use them. Why they really wanted to create the functional specs was so that it can be used by the from the maintenance point of view. But what happens is that code keeps on changing, and instead of focusing on the documentation, you need to create the test cases which become the executable spec. So instead of uh, having I mean thinking the function specs as a bible, you have to start considering the code as a bible. And that's where the function to automate test functional test cases which are created in the BDD language are really helpful. Similarly, other point of view is that functional spec can be used by the people who are in the production support, for example. I mean, in certain respect, yes, but in many respect, they really need a different kind of documentation which fits their purpose. So they want to see, like, in case this happens, then what all they need to do. So basically, depending on the what are the audience for your documentation, you need to see like what you actually need. So from the development perspective, user story documentation is fine. From the maintenance point of view, also the code can be the executable spec. And for the training point of view, you can create a different document which can be, for example, screencast or anything else also. Does this answer your question, Charu?
Yeah, I think Shrikant, you could move on to the next one.
Okay, I need to move to the next one. Then, in an agile team, do we have dedicated testers, developers, designers, or resources are expected to all these? Uh, no, I mean, you will be dedicated testers, developers, and designers, and you don't need to do everything. I mean, you may have the specialization in one thing, and you can have a secondary skill as another thing. So, for example, from a tester point of view, these days it is good to have a kind of good some understanding of the development also, because they need to create the scripts. They need to write the functional test cases in Selenium, for example, where the scripting is required. So if they don't have that kind of development skill there, then it may not help their needs. uh, when I say cross skilling the developers, what I only mean to say is that at right now I'm working in for example, uh, Spring framework as a developer. Now I should not have any issues to work in different framework like Seam or something else, because just because I have been working in that technology for a long time. So based on the need of the project, you should be able to change the way you work, and it not only means on a technology level but also functional level also. Like you are working on a particular domain right now, but and you need to have that kind of understanding before you can start work. So it should not be like I'm just a developer who works in one domain, I cannot work in another domain. And uh, that can be surprising, but in many enterprises it is the way it is. I mean, some people work in some developer work for certain domain only. They may have the same similar technical skill, but they just work on that domain only. uh, the next question is there a concept of final release in agile testing, like after alpha testing, full round of testing at development environment? So as mentioned, so there are ideas around uh, system integration testing and user acceptance testing. The only difference in between those testing is that the environment in the UAT can be the production ready environment, and sometimes the problems not don't come because the way you have coded, but the kind of configuration which are required for that kind of environment, and also the amount of load you will be having, those kind of things. So in those cases you have those testing. Does this answer your question, Anjali? In between, I'll just move on to next question, which is about using ATDD approach. If we got a lot of defects in development, then what type of approach should be taken? First of all, just to make sure that I make it very clear, ATDD or any kind of Selenium testing or any functional testing means that it's a very heavyweight kind of testing. And why I say it, because when you do the end-to-end testing, then it takes a lot of time. So if you have, for example, 400 functional test cases, then it may mean that you are taking around 4 hours to just to execute them. So in order to make sure that it works, you need to have a good foundation of the unit test cases, integration test cases. On top of that, only you build the functional test cases. Otherwise, what will happen is functional test cases will keep on breaking, and after a while, nobody really cares about them. So ATDD is not the silver bullet. You need to have good amount of foundation of unit integration test cases. So, for example, a test coverage of 75% or 80%. On top of that, if you create the acceptance test cases which run on lightly build basis, then they are very useful. If you are just creating the acceptance test cases, then it it really may not make sense. Does this answer your question, Roshan? Uh, before Roshan answers the question I just mentioned, I'll move on to the next one. Uh, so so what if we have tested one story and get the bug in the next build? When testing other story, do we need to test all stories again in new build? Uh, yes. I mean, you have tested one story, and uh, when in this case what you're trying to say is when you're trying to test the second story, then you got the bug in the first story, and that is a kind of regression bug. And definitely you when you are testing any kind of story, you want to make sure that your whole functionality is really working. Otherwise, I mean, if some you're creating one and you're creating another bug, and it doesn't really make sense. So that's why we are trying to say that when you're creating the first story, you create automated test case on top of that, and then so that in case uh, any problem happens, when you run the test cases of the second user story, then you will find out, okay, something is broken in the first user story, so you need to fix it. So so that kind of feedback comes to the developer itself. Tester doesn't have to do it, because if there is automated test case, it will fail, and it will let the developer know that because of which changes something is broken. So just to make sure that I put it correctly, that for the testing of the second user story, you need to make sure that the first user story is also working.
Yeah, and I think we need to keep one thing in mind, that that test automation is not a luxury. I think it's a necessity on Agile. If not, as we go on from sprint to sprint, where the product is getting bigger and bigger, we'll not be able to get to a state of done by end of the sprint by just doing manual testing. So you need to. There is a different kind of test automation approaches that we could take. It's very tough to really go over all those approaches here on the webinar. But yes, there you need to be very careful about what approach you take in test automation, where to automate at what level. There are a lot of it's a quite in-depth topic by itself. But overall, as a team, the team is more successful in making sure everything is working end of the sprint, not only the current sprint, but even whatever they have done in the previous sprints.
So next question is from Anjali, and it's a very good question. How an agile testing improves the quality? Once a tester becomes adaptable to the team, he is always favored to developers, right? Chances to trying negative testing is less. Uh, so I think first of all, we need to make sure that what we understand that the product, whatever we are trying to do, is for the end customer. So that is the end goal, and that for that only everybody is working. And what happens if you give a shit quality of the code or the software to the end user? He'll be disappointed, and and basically the end goal for which you are working will not met. So it's not only the responsibility of the tester to make sure that your functionality is tested thoroughly. It's the first and foremost importance for the developer itself himself, to make sure that his code is tested thoroughly and is well proven. If you think from the if you see the Google way of testing, you find there is a lot more focus on the developers. There are a lot of developers in a team, but lot less testers. The idea is that the testing is also a very important uh, aspect for the developer. So he himself has to solve the problems that he has created. So I think we need to understand that tester is not going to be biased, but just the way he is going to think now is to make sure that instead of thinking on his own, he's thinking for the end goal, and that is the only thing. He's not going to reduce the number of bugs or something, but he's focused on maybe avoiding those bugs. Does this answer your question, Anjali? Any more questions from anybody?
If you still have any other questions, people, you could drop an email. We will try to either respond there, or you could go to Agile Buddha Facebook page and you could drop a question there too. We would respond there with our thoughts, either I or Shrikant. So don't hesitate to contact us anytime.
Uh, I'll take this as a last question from Anjali again. Uh, is agile costing suitable for timely billing projects? Definitely. I mean, uh, we need to make sure that when we are talking about agile fixed bid projects, then we are saying then and there that customer has prioritized his requirements. He has clearly stated that this is what I need in the next 2 weeks, and after that I need this 2 weeks. So basically, the prioritization has done from top to bottom. The idea of the fixed bid agile projects is that in case something is remaining at the end as a tail end, then it is something which is kind of should have or could have. It is not really kind of must have which a customer wanted, but it could not be delivered. So in order to make sure that you deliver the high quality product to the customer, definitely you need to have uh, testing or test automation and all these practices. What I'm trying to say is that whatever these practices which I mentioned here can be included as part of the waterfall projects also. But the thing is that these are part of the framework of agile, but they need to be used specifically, and they can be used. Nobody stops them. Uh, a question from Neil Kamal is how agile better than other testing methodology? Um, I don't know what is there any other methodology? I mean, what testing methodology you're talking about? I don't know actually. Uh, Agile is a methodology to work as a team. That's what I say, and towards one goal, reducing silos, and work based on the common sense. And if it is agile, that is what I call agile. If there is any other thing which you have in your mind, maybe you want to mention.
Yeah,
Can I get the PPT copy of the webinars? This is from Srinu. And what I'll try to do is like I'll put in that as a slide share, and you can use it whenever you want.
yeah, true, Shrikant. I think then we could add it on our web page so that people can take a look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think probably people are done. Okay, I think Shrikant, there is
Yeah,
one
I think.
more question.
Yeah, so Neil Kamal is saying that how agile came into picture. So agile is I'll just give you the background. So what happened was before 2001 there were a lot of methodology people were creating, uh, and there were a lot of things like people started using rational unified process. There was crystal. There were many other methodologies people were coming with, and the idea was really same. I mean, towards the things which we just mentioned. So people were coming with different kind of methodologies, and I mean, it was kind of creating chaos at the time. So what those people did was they sat together in Chicago, or I think in Utah, and discussed what all they're looking for, and that's where they came up with the Agile Manifesto. It was done in the 2001, and so basically all the proponents of different methodology sit together and define what all they are looking for in the software development, and that's where they came with the Agile Manifesto. Agile is generally implemented using Scrum or Kanban. When I say Scrum, it means that you define a timeline of 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and in that you try to do your work. When I say Kanban, it means that your time, I mean the work cannot be work cannot be defined within that particular span of time, and that is kind of cases when you are doing the maintenance scenarios, because the production bug really doesn't wait for anybody. uh, so these are the kind of, when I say scrum and kanban, it just means that how you're going to structure your work, how you're going to structure your project, and it gives some certain kind of ceremonies which can, they can be used in anywhere. When I say anywhere, they can be used in non-technical project also, and scrum and kanban can be used there also. But when it comes to extreme programming practices, they are totally focused towards software development. And so in at my home also, I use, for example, kanban to prioritize my task. So these ideas can be used anywhere. Vinod Yadav, how do you compare with V model of testing? So just a moment. Uh, can you explain, Vinod, what is V model testing? I don't know actually. Vinod, you are there?
Okay, Shrikant, I think we are quite running out of time. Would you mind then we could probably explain you email or so, then we could take it forward.
Yeah, in asking questions, and basically the idea of those questions will be to also have further webinars. So if you come with a lot of ideas or the problems or you are facing in your daily workspace, then that they can be discussed as part of the next webinars also. So the idea is not to have the slideshow and be finished with it. The idea is to make sure that we focus on the problems we face on daily basis.